Dobry den. Thank you so much, Sergey, and all of you for being here today to listen to a small glimpse of my presentation, since unfortunately I'm not there in person. I am asked to speak a bit about children's rights and the commitment that we all have on raising our young children with their dignity and to basically help to empower them to be the best that they can be. A part of this starts with a foundational document of the United Nations, which is called the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. This document really teaches us about how all children have the right to education, and that this right includes being able to learn and develop and grow and basically be able to thrive as they develop into adulthood. And it should be that the school environment is really helping each and every student to find their passion and purpose. We have worked over the years to create a curriculum that I'm on raising children with roots, rights, and responsibilities. And I think that one of our challenges is, how do we do that? How do we make sure that children are really feeling valued and listened to, and that they're able to be excited about lifelong learning, no matter what their given cognitive abilities or their physical abilities or their emotional kind of stability. We want everyone to be able to grow, and that our teaching has to be able to try and be inclusive and help young people learn from each other with their differing gifts. So we start off by really encouraging schools to think about their own daily philosophy and to create kind of a standard philosophy for the culture of the school. That philosophy can include the notions of, no matter how hard times get, we never give up on our children. No matter what they are here for, we never judge them. No matter what they say, we know they have potential. And finally, no matter how busy we are with all of the demands of teaching, we always have time to listen. And I think that core philosophy, those elements, really help us make sure that we're reflecting on our own practice and trying to ensure that we're able to help all learn. We talk about the notion of taking your human rights temperature of your school. So using some of these standards to think about whether or not all children are feeling valued, whether they're all feeling like they have equal access to information, whether they feel like they are free from violence or harm. So we want to make sure that our schools are really trying to accept all students, no matter what their abilities, no matter what languages they speak, their ethnic backgrounds. We believe that everyone, with all of the differences, need to be able to be valued and find opportunities. Now, when we try and begin, we encourage young people to think about how they can create their norms of the classroom. So we talk about what the students may need to learn, and then we develop or encourage students to develop kind of the standards of the classroom. Oftentimes we share kind of what we call our respect poster, which talks about how can you really respect each other and allow them to really learn and find their voice in the classroom. So we really both talk about principles and then talk about kind of the norms that classrooms need in order for everyone to try and feel valued. We also recognize in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child that was adopted and came and entered into force in 1990 that every child has four components. They have the right to survive, they have the right to develop, they have the right to be safe, and they have the right to participate. So all in its simplest forms, we try and make sure that schools have the opportunities for all four of those elements to be integrated. We talk about how, I guess, the right to survive, when we're looking at that, really is the notion around the right to provide adequate food, clean water, and everyday care, child care. It's also a focus on medical and psychological care and health of the child, and this environmental hygiene. In terms of the right to develop, it's kind of in our schools, we really see it as providing a quality schooling and support to every child in our care. We commit to providing life skills, so young people, when they leave the formal school setting, they know how to take care of themselves as well. And we commit to respecting the child's own cultural identities, language, and the values that they uphold. In terms of the notion of the right to protection in our schools, we look at that as to protect our children in our care from any form of abuse or exploitation. We also talk about being able to protect our young people if we find that there's maltreatment at home by parents or others, and that it's a requirement to report to our health systems if that is the case. We commit to providing special care to children with mental health and self-harming concerns. And finally, the notion of the right to participation in our schools. And this has to do with following a model of due process and restoration. If something happens that some of our norms of the school are violated, then we try to work with the young people to figure out how we can learn from the mistakes or the challenges. And that's not just trying to have the one child disciplined, but it's having the whole school classroom learn from those experiences so that we can all try and help each other. We create an environment of safety for children and for parents to also feel that they can express their views regarding the environment of learning and how to make sure that we're successful. And finally, our orientation really focuses on the care and opportunities to ask questions and to clarify questions or information if there's some confusion. The way we try and focus on how we can really make all of these practices integrated in our daily practices are through oftentimes circles. So at the beginning of the class time, you may be in circles so that each child has an opportunity to share how they are feeling. They may be able to you may bring up one question, and then everyone is able to share a response. Thus, it's not solely teacher-centered, but rather child-centered, so that they're able to bring their lived experiences and understanding into the classroom as well. And we also recognize that there's a lot of stress in our students from home environment, from the society. And in this way, they're learning to find their own voices to share a lot of their concerns. And then they're able to think about how they can reconcile and problem solve. We also try and make sure that that we recognize that young people can be fearful, and even adults and teachers, depending on the context, may have fears, and that is normal, and that we will not judge people for their fears, and we want to kind of build confidence and self-confidence in our students and young people. So during this kind of the circle process, we really check in with our young people, and we want to make sure that they are have the food that they need, and really that they have what it takes to grow and develop. We also talk about surviving different challenges of discipline problems or challenges at home. We provide information on, again, the resources, rules, and substance of the information. In particular, we want to make sure that our well-being of our students are met. So any sort of medical needs, if there are mental health concerns or self-harming concerns, we want to make sure that we're on top of those needs. And we really look at trying to create strengths of resilience with our young people. So both the personal, the family, and the cultural context. So for example, on a personal level, they're able to identify 3 traits that keep you going. You know, what makes you stronger? Or people say you are good at what? So that they can self-identify what are those characteristics that they feel really confident and good about. Secondly, with family, we talk about what values did your loved ones teach you? Who do you care for in your family? And on a cultural level, we look at defining the cultural heritage. What has your culture taught you? Next, we look at various kind of stress management or inclusive environments guidelines. So we talk about how they can learn skills to manage stress, and how they can handle kind of sadness or grief if that happens, and what are tools. So for example, in some classrooms you may have a space in the classroom where students know that they can actually get up if they're feeling like they need a space to be quiet, and go to an area in the classroom just to be on their own. We try to make sure that everyone has a strong support network, and ask, who are people you can trust, and look at any sort of community-based support partners that can also work within our schools. And finally, the spiritual needs. Are there spiritual practices that need to be considered in order for, I guess, during the school day? We talk about kind of building, again, this resiliency in young people, and really how you manage risks. We also want to make sure that our physical environment is inclusive. So both accessing the building as well as being able to access the, whether it's the social media components of our classroom or the written materials. So you're probably going to hear more on universal design learning, or this notion of person-centered models. But we really try and make sure that we're doing multiple different methods in the classroom, from the arts, from both the visual learning to the written to the speaking, so that young people can try and use multiple different learning styles in the classroom. And in addition to on the physical environment, we talk about what kind of they need to feel healthy, and again, how often are they able to leave and have recess during the day, which we think is very important. So the environmental features, whether you're using stress balls, colors, drawing pads, journals. I mentioned the quiet corner. Classroom walls can also show awards for positive behavior, or you may have a board that has burning questions that students are thinking of. You can also have them have a space where they can share their ideas for what they might want to learn, and other ideas for like maps and creative learning tools. But I think one of the most important skills is we really focus on interpersonal communication skills. And that is, how are they going to relate to their peers? We look at social emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, and this notion of how can we really learn from each other to build a stronger community within the classroom, and how can we then work in teams, and how can we also think about going and working in community. So there's many team projects that actually reach out to the community as well, so that they can be doing projects that really have respond to a need in the community. For example, if there is a lot of pollution on the streets, what might be some creative ways to try and clean up the environment? If we're having homelessness issues, how can they use math skills to understand what's going on for access to housing? So some of the criteria for the interpersonal communication skills includes to incorporate practical skills of deep listening and helpful talking in our communication. To begin with respectful and caring attitudes with which to listen and to speak. And that you need to really deeply listen to others. So not be ready to speak on top of another person, but instead really hear what a person is saying and try and then reframe and see if they've really understood the meaning of what someone else has shared. So picking also helpful words to convey concerns, and talk with children the way that you want them to talk with you. This notion of not avoiding conflict, that we have to then teach reconciliation and conflict resolution skills, which is really essential for life. You can write compliments. You can have students speak to each other about something that they have learned from each other, and encourage questioning and exploration. We also know that this deep and reflective listening is really crucial. And I think the interpersonal use of I messaging we talk about. So I do not hate you, Alex, but I dislike your kicks, bites, and swearing. So that notion. And then also to pay attention to the nonverbal communication skills. We talk about trying to create a democratic classroom, so it's much more participatory, which I know it can be very scary for teachers. But in this way, we're able to then have an exchange and have young people really also a little bit more involved in the learning process. I think right now I will just leave it with the importance of role-playing and engaging young people as much as possible in their learning process. We've found that if you kind of ask children to get involved and think, about what projects they may be able to bring to the classroom, they really are excited to participate and be fully engaged. So I just want to say again, Dyakuyu for listening to me in this distance learning arena. And I wish you the very best in all that you do. And thank you, and I hope that we'll stay in touch. Take care.